Hello Linux fans, Rob here and welcome to Linux Quest. Thank you for watching. So today we're going to take a look at an independent distribution called ObRevenge, and I'm especially excited about this video for several reasons. So let me explain. Not only are we going to look at this nice independently built from scratch Arch-based distribution, but at the end of this video we also have an opportunity to interview the developer. And so I'm really looking forward to having Jody James, the developer of ObRevenge. Towards the end of the video we get to have some Q&A time with Jody, and I love this because you get some insight from the developer as to what was the motivation for this distribution, what are your plans, where does it fit, what's the user market, things like that. I mean, you get the real inside scoop on a particular distribution, and I've always found that fascinating, and I think you will really enjoy this. Now there's a third part to this too that I want to explain. About a month and a half ago, Joe Collins, and I'm sure all know Joe Collins. He has a terrific YouTube channel, Linux focused YouTube channel with really high quality content. He actually took a look at ObRevenge as well. Now there have been a lot of changes since then. Jody's been hard at work, and so I want to go through some of those features. Now this will not be as detailed a review as you've seen in other distributions, simply because I want to kind of get some of this information from Jody during the Q&A part. I want him to go through and point out various things for us as well, but I do want to point out the highlights and some of the tools and things that I found. So let's jump right in. Now I immediately was impressed with the theme here. This is based off of Arc. It's Dark Arc, and it looks really nice. This is an Arch wallpaper I have not seen before. It matches the rest of the theming very nice. You see the beautiful red icon here for the menu launcher. This happens to be the XFCE Whisker menu, which I'm a fan of as well, so it was great to see that right out of the gate. Now there are some things here that are, I'm going to call OBR for short, OBR tool related, and I want to really point these out because I was really surprised and impressed at the same time. The first thing I want to point out to you is what you'll see upon first boot, and that is the ObRevenge software installation tool. Now at first glance I thought, what is this here? So you have three categories: Internet, Media, and Office. So if you click onto Internet, you are presented with a list of applications here, and so really this gives you choice in the setup process when you first launch into OBR. And in the Linux world we all love choice, so you've got Firefox, Chromium, those kinds of things which are not pre-installed, so you can go in and choose and kind of cater to what works for you for this distribution. Very nice selection of high quality tools here in multimedia. You had Simple Screen Recorder, which I use to record these videos, Kdenlive and OBS Studio, so it was great to see all those, so you'd go through and select those. And then the same with Office. LibreOffice was not pre-installed, which is great. Maybe you've got another Office suite that you like, or perhaps for the particular device you don't need Office installed, so you would go in and select or not select what you wanted there. Now once you're done with choosing, you simply have a one-click install. So one click and you sit back and all of that software that you chose will install. So this is a real time saver, and I like that this is presented as you boot in for the first time, because if you're not familiar with this distribution, this gives you a good starting point. And again, I was really impressed with the quality of the the theming all matches, the nice red icon here. It looks like it's a cohesive OS, as it should look. So that's one tool that I was impressed with. And there are others here, and most of these have been added since Joe Collins did his review, so that's where it'll be fun. You'll be able to watch this video and then go back and see Joe's video, and you'll kind of get a mix of thoughts on the distribution, and that's always been fun. So another tool here that's been added is the ObRevenge wallpaper download tool. Now at first I thought what I was launching into, and I'm going to critique this just a little bit here, I thought what I was launching into was a wallpaper selection tool. And it's not quite that. What this will do is once you click yes, it will automatically download 10 random wallpapers from the website interface lift. Now, so when I clicked yes, I expected to see really a window here with various wallpapers to choose from. But actually what it's doing is it's just like it said, it's downloading 10 random wallpapers. I'm going to go ahead and click cancel here because I've downloaded lots of wallpapers already, and we'll take a look at that. So it's going to create a folder for you in your pictures folder called Wallpapers, and again, convenient there, well thought out. And as you can see, I've gone through this several times. I was really surprised with the quality of these wallpapers. These are just stunning, beautiful wallpapers. I'll give you a quick example here. Just beautiful. So, you know, for some people, that's all they'll want. They'll be able to go in out of 10 wallpapers and find 2 or 3 that they like and move on. You know, I spend time looking at wallpapers online way more than I probably should, but anyway. So I think this is a nice tool. I think it could be expanded by giving the user a choice as they go through, maybe a window that gives you a choice out of, you know, 20 or 30 wallpapers to choose the 10 you want to download, or to choose the number of wallpapers you want to download. May be a nice addition. And this is, you know, this distribution is a work in progress, and Jody's always looking for improvements there. So, but still, again, impressed to see that tool there. And some of the other tools here as well, auto start, and I won't spend a lot of time here, but this allows you to go in and configure what will start up at boot, and you can also remove applications that are starting up at boot. So again, a very nice tool to have. And this one I thought was great because I've run into this with various distributions. So this is an application, it's the OBR Mirror List Update. It's an application that will sort the 100 fastest Arch Linux mirrors and write them to the Pac-Man mirror list file. So one click there and you can get that all sorted, and now you are accessing the fastest mirrors available. Now, in the beginning, you saw the ObRevenge software tool, and I don't want to mislead you there. I don't want you to think that is the only software you have available. You have a selection of software through the Pac-Man interface, and let's just go to that there, Software Manager. And if you're an Arch user, or you use Manjaro or Antergos, you will be familiar with this. Let's go in here and just take a look at something here. So this is PAMAC 4.1.5, and this allows you to go in and easily turn on the AUR. I'm not going to do that right now, but you can go in and toggle on the AUR. So you'll be familiar with this. So once you've turned on the AUR, you've got access to a huge repository of software. So I just point that out because I didn't want you to think that the OBR software install tool was your only option for software. That's just a tool that makes it that has pre-selected a group of high quality software packages that you can go in and quickly choose and install with one click. And again, I think that's very smart. So just wanted to make sure there that you knew really what you're dealing with on the software side. Now, this is a unique setup for me. This is the first time I've seen this desktop combination. This is a combination of OpenBox desktop environment with the XFCE panel. So we've already talked a little bit here about this being the Whisker menu, which I'm a fan of, and it's really highly configurable. And the other thing I appreciated about this is the categories are over here on the left by default. Typically, if I go in and I'm working with XFCE, you find by default the categories are on the right by default, and I always have to take the time to go in and change that and put the categories to the left. Just muscle memory. So I was really happy to see that set up that way out of the box. Perhaps Jody's watched my past videos and he knew, I'm just kidding, but he knew that I liked them on the left. I'm just kidding. Anyway, it was great to see that out of the box, and again, that saved me time, and I just naturally, it felt right. I'm not familiar really at all with the OpenBox desktop environment, but I will say to you that this has been an extremely fast, light OS as I've used this. I've used this over a day and a half now, and really put it through some paces yesterday with some real work, adding and removing software, going online, doing various things that you'd use, you know, day in, day out on an OS, and I've really put it through the paces, and it's been lightning fast. Now, I am told that upon cold boot, you're looking at somewhere between 230 and 280 megabyte of RAM usage. Now, that's extremely low. I think if you load up most distributions with GNOME or KDE, you're going to find closer to maybe double that in some cases, 480 to 580, somewhere around in there. So, very light on memory usage, and just overall feel, it's extremely fast. Now, I'm running this on a system with a Core i3 and 4 gigs of RAM. It does have an SSD drive, so that helps. But I've run enough distros to know what really feels fast and what doesn't, and this is really, really fast. So impressive there. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through all of the software that's installed by default and that kind of thing here. Really wanted you to get a good overall look at things. Now, there is one other thing I want to point out here that is new. Let me go to Control Panel. And so this has recently been updated here. So if you go into Control Panel, you have these tabs for the various categories, and I really like that. A lot of times what you see in Control Panel is this long list of icons which are categorized, but a lot of times there's no way to single out the particular category you're working with, so you're looking at a lot at one time. And so to see this tabbed interface, I think more developers should take a look at this. This allows you to really focus in on the particular group that you're working with, having this tabbed interface here. So you have customization, you have system, and you have software. I want to point out another thing here that just came to mind, panel switcher. Now, this is something that I haven't paid attention in other distributions if I've seen it. So this was new and surprising to me as well. You can actually go in and change the panel from XFCE, which is default, to the LX panel or the Tint 2 panel. Now, I'm not familiar with the Tint 2 panel. That was new for me, but I did spend a little time going in and switching things. I'm not going to do it for the video. I prefer the XFCE. However, I started thinking about it. If you've used this for a while and you're ready for a change, sometimes just switching the panel and giving the panel a different look gives you that feel of change. So it's nice to have that choice. Again, in Linux, we all love choice. Now, you also see here theme settings, and then there's a Qt theme setting as well. Now, here's what looks to me like a more common theme setting control here that I'm used to seeing. And I noticed that, and I'm going to just kind of jump around here a little bit. I noticed that there are also lots of configuration settings for OpenBox. And so I think Jody is aware of this as well. You've got a lot of options there as far as configuration, and I think maybe this could be a little confusing for people as to where do you go to change out the theme. Does one override the other? Because there's a lot going on there in choice for theme settings. And again, I'm not familiar with OpenBox, so I'm not going to spend time going through and changing things or anything like that, just because I don't know my way around well enough to know what applies and what works and what doesn't. But anyway, without getting caught up in all of that, I would say that that's something that Jody is looking at, is that there are lots of options for themes and settings and things like that seem like some of them are redundant and override one another. All right, well, I'm going to wrap this up here because I really want to get into the Q&A session with Jody. I really look forward to him sharing his thought behind his distribution here, and his motivation and all of the things that you never see really or hear about in a distribution unless you have an opportunity like this to hear from the developer. And so we're going to go ahead and wrap this up, so stay tuned here just a second and we will pop over and look forward to introducing Jody James. Thank you for watching. Okay, so let's welcome Jody James to Linux Quest. Jody is an independent developer who taught himself how to code so he could follow his interest in Linux. And as you saw from the review, he's developed quite a nice distro called ObRevenge, which is based on Arch. And Jody was kind enough to tear himself away from coding and development to talk with us about his build and kind of his motivation behind it. And so Jody, welcome. I'd like to just start off, Jody, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself. And I've got to ask, with a name like Jody James, are you any relation to Jesse James, the famous outlaw?
I can't tell you how much I would love to be able to say that yes, I was, because that would really be so cool. But unfortunately, to my knowledge, I am not. However, I just wanted to tell you thank you for the opportunity to come on and talk with you, and thank you for taking an interest in the distro as well. I'm from Texas and lived here my whole life. Not really anything extraordinary, just a normal guy. I got involved with Linux a little less than a year ago, actually. In December of 2015 is when I installed my first distribution, and it was Ubuntu 14.04, the long-term support release at the time.
Right.
Probably a similar story to what a lot of people have heard before. I used a laptop as my daily machine, and throughout numerous Windows updates, it had become slower and slower and more difficult to use. And so I started looking for alternatives. I had heard of Linux before, but honestly was intimidated by it.
Right.
So
Right.
I jumped on the internet doing research, and luckily found some really good YouTube videos and things like that changed my mind a little bit about it. I decided to give it a shot, and when I installed it, was really just blown away. It made my laptop 100% faster, much more usable, and from that moment, I was really pretty much hooked. At that point, I kind of jumped in with both feet and started consuming everything about Linux that I could find. So
that is absolutely awesome. Yeah, and some people, quite frankly, some people take a look at it and they'll hit a stumbling block or two and then they'll just move on. But it sounds like you kind of embrace those stumbling blocks. Now, you've taught yourself how to code. You had no formal training for programming or anything like that. I mean, how long did that take, and what was that process like?
that's true. And as far as how long, if I ever get finished, I will let you know. But it's really a process. I definitely still consider myself much more of a student than have mastered anything. But I started off, as far as coding, really with shell scripting. There are a lot of great tutorials available, blogs and YouTube videos and things like that. And I started with shell scripting and really scripting a lot of jobs that I liked to do just on my personal system. And that kind of evolved further into coding with Python, and then into trying to make graphical front ends for those scripts using GTK and things like that. And it really just kind of built from there. And before I knew it, I'd built myself a few applications and things of that nature. And it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it more than I can tell you, really. I enjoy trying to build something new. I enjoy trying to solve problems as they come up. I mean, that's the funnest part to me, really. I have to say, though, is that it's not really so much my accomplishment is how I feel about it. Really, the kind of the star of the show here is Linux itself and the Linux community. There is an amazing amount of information out there.
Yep.
That's really just freely available to anybody.
Yep.
And it's out there to learn how to do almost anything on the system you want to do. And it's really a testament that to the Linux community at large, that a virtual noob like myself less than a year ago is able to really jump in and learn to do all of these things. So it's I really think that Linux itself and the community are really kind of the stars of that show.
I would agree with you 100%. It is a truly amazing thing that, like as you described yourself, a normal guy can, in a relatively short period of time, develop his own operating system. That's something 20 years ago or 15, 20 years ago, people just weren't even really talking about much. So,
Right.
So I'm curious, the name ObRevenge, where did that name come from? What's the story behind that name?
Yeah, okay. There was, well, I'll start from the beginning. Obviously, the OB part refers to open box, which I imagine most people kind of figured that part of it out. But
Mm-hmm.
there was a man on YouTube that I learned a vast amount from, specifically with Arch Linux. His name was Dan Ackles. And Dan actually created a distribution, his own distribution, based on the i3 window manager and also based on Arch Linux, and it was called i3 Nemesis. And it wasn't a real big project, but it was something that I had found that he had done. Unfortunately, Dan, a few months ago, passed away. And when that happened, I kind of decided to maybe come up with something similar for the name of what I was working on, because I really felt like he had influenced what I had done quite a bit. And so I tried to stay with the same kind of theme there, and came up with ObRevenge, kind of along the same lines.
Awesome. That is awesome. You know, that's one of those things that you're right. Sometimes the name coincides with the distribution, and you can kind of figure out, hey, yeah, I understand where this name came from, and so the that's awesome to hear. I always enjoy that, kind of the backstory behind the name. So you've kind of answered some too. Really, I had a question for you pertaining to Arch and what drew you to Arch as opposed to, say, Debian, for example.
I distro hopped the first couple of months that I was on Linux, and I've tried probably almost every distribution out there that I could find. I started with Ubuntu, as I'd said earlier, and I still love Ubuntu. I will have a soft spot for it forever, since it was the first one that I tried.
Mm-hmm.
But moving around, I settled on Arch and really fell in love with it. And a lot of it is because of the versatility. You get such a powerful but small and simple base with Arch Linux, and you can, from that point, build any system that you want. And I fell in love with that. You can build a system from the same base. You can build a huge server that's running, a data server for a corporation, or you can build a system to be running on your laptop just there locally, and it all starts with the same base. And that, to me, was just, it kind of blew me away. I was so impressed with it and I love the idea of the cutting edge packages, that Arch Linux provides you as well through their official repos. So
Absolutely.
I've fallen in love with it.
And that Arch community, as I have started to dig a little more into Arch-based distros, that Arch-based community is huge there. So I imagine you had quite a bit of support along the way as well.
Oh, absolutely. That there are two things that have been my best friend over the last several months working on this, and one was Google, just to be honest, and the other was the Arch Wiki. And and it kind of goes back to what I said before. There's so much awesome documentation out there in the community. The Arch Wiki is one of the best, and there's so much information there that really is even distro non-specific. I mean, there's so much information there that pertains to almost any distribution of Linux, and so it is really helpful.
Well, that's awesome. So, you could have done like others. You could have made a spin off of another distro and made it your own. So, I mean, and I'm not saying that's an easy thing to do, but it's certainly harder to kind of start from scratch and build your own. So, I mean, what drove you there as opposed to just latching on to maybe an abandoned distro that was already somewhat developed?
And that's an excellent question. I think if you ask my wife, she would tell you this just because I have to do everything the hard way. But it kind of goes back to that whole falling in love with Arch Linux thing. I love the Arch philosophy of building it up from the ground up. I love the idea of only installing what you need and kind of leaving everything else out. Kind of that KISS, keep it simple philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted the opportunity to kind of craft something that met the goals that I had myself, including even the base, and try to mold that a little bit and select specifically, what packages I wanted included and what I didn't. So to me, it just made more sense to go ahead and start just with a simple base and build up from there.
Gotcha. And I understand that part of wanting to do things yourself, and there's, to each his own there, but I understand where you're coming from for sure on that. So, what would I mean? Everyone, once they delve into any particular distro, there are certain features that always stand out, and certain features that you latch onto. What are those features for you in OBR? And that's probably a trick question in some regards, since you built it. So, but do you have things that really stand out that you say, hey, I'm really proud of this and really like this?
Well, of course, all of it. No, I'm just playing. Probably one of the things that I'm the most proud of is that it's really lightweight. That was really one of my goals from the beginning, is to keep the system overall as lightweight as possible.
Yeah.
And that's for several reasons. Traditionally, you think of a lightweight system being designed for less powerful hardware. But even for more powerful hardware, the lighter weight the operating system is itself, the more power you save for the actual work that you have intended to do on the system.
Right, right.
Also, though, I'm a tinkerer. I love to play with things. I love to tinker with the system and change things. And so I love the idea behind the panel switcher, and I think that has been implemented fairly well. I think it works out pretty well. And being able to move the panel around and just choose different panels and different menus and things like that. I love anything that kind of gives you a chance to customize and to change things around. I tend to get bored myself if the system looks the same day after day. So I really tried to build in a few ways to change it up yourself without feeling like you needed to go and install something completely different.
Well, that that was one of my favorite features as well. And actually, in the video, that was one of the things that I highlighted, was with just a few clicks to change the panel and a few other things, you could really have a feeling like you're really in a different distro, right. That you're in a different environment. And I'm the same way, being a habitual distro hopper, so myself. And the other thing I've got to attest to, now I had no experience with OpenBox as a desktop environment, but listen, I don't know what sauce you've poured into OBR, but it is blazingly fast, and I will attest to that. The speed of OBR is noticeable, and and you've seen my videos, I think, Jody. I've gone through over the last 2 months. I couldn't tell you how many distros I have tried, and just immediately you could tell with OBR it is fast.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I know you do go through quite a few and look at quite a few, so it means a little bit more to hear you say it. That was definitely one of the goals I had behind it, is keeping it lightweight and to move as quickly and easily as possible. So it's nice to hear you say that.
Excuse me. Well, based on that, who would you say is a good target user for OBR? And that's kind of one of the things that I think people like to do and people like to hear is, this is a good distro. And I'll give you an example. You'll hear people say a good distro for a beginner is Ubuntu Mate or Elementary OS. So where would you say the target is for OBR?
The target user that I had in mind is somebody who's maybe not a brand new user, but a newer user, maybe moving towards that intermediate level. I would love to say that a brand new user could install this for their very first distribution. And while I think that they probably could and could probably figure out how things go, with the Arch repositories and the rolling release model, it is something you do have to take a little bit more responsibility for yourself on your system and updating and watching out for bugs and things like that. On the flip side of that, I did try to build in quite a few graphical tools that you don't necessarily get with a base Arch installation to try to make things a little bit easier for a new user. So it's kind of a balance there. At the same time, I tried to also build in some tools that would make the more advanced user, feel at home as well.
Right.
There's key bindings for a traditional terminal. There's key bindings for a drop-down terminal for the advanced user. And there's some shortcuts to get in and even edit some text configuration files on the system if a more advanced or more experienced user would like to do some of those things. but at the same time, I wanted to make sure we had an easy way, as far as package management, excuse me,
Right.
for a newer user and things of that nature. So it's a difficult balance to reach, but it probably more towards that intermediate user, and really anybody who wants a lightweight distribution that they can use, and a system that kind of gets out of their way once they start working. You can open up an application and it should open up quickly, and then there's not a lot of other distractions around in the system.
You see now a kind of a trend. Early days of Linux, there was kind of one or two desktop focus. You would typically see GNOME or KDE. You didn't see a lot of different desktop environments. Do you have any plans there? You thinking about adding other desktop environments, or are you just going to focus on what you have now?
For the time being, I plan to focus more on what I have now and make it the best possible that I can. I am not opposed at looking at other desktop environments, but I'm pretty solid on the goal of staying as lightweight as possible. So some of the heavier environments I would probably stay away from.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that at all. I mean, that, having that focus just allows you, I think, and I've always thought about it that way, if you are kind of zeroed in on something, it allows you to really focus in on making that particular setup the best that it can be. So
Right.
don't think there's a thing wrong with that. Do you have any goals for OBR to make an official release at some point? Is that
Not specifically. Like I said, right now I'm still working on what I have. I feel like we're at a pretty good spot so far, but I definitely don't feel like I'm finished with it. If I ever get to the point where, maybe at some point I might even think about putting a little bit more of a team together. We might look at even creating our own website, things like that. And if we get to a point like that, I might consider more of an official release and a little bit more mainstream. But I've got to be honest, it has worked out and a lot better than I anticipated to begin with. Anyway, I really started building this mostly just for myself.
right?
And, started sharing it around, and it kind of took off a little bit more than I expected already. So just kind of see how that goes. I'm going to keep working on things to make things work as well as possible, and try to add some new features, and we'll see how that goes. Kind of play it by ear, I guess.
Well, I look forward to seeing that progress. And in the video, I mentioned that Joe Collins did a review a little over a month or so ago, and you've added a tremendous amount of additions, added controls and things like that in that time frame. So look forward to seeing the continual progress there. If and this is one of those, I guess one of those questions that I'll call it what you want to call it. So if you didn't have OBR, what distro would you be? It's kind of like if you were a tree, Jody, what kind of tree would you be? No, if you weren't running. So, I mean, do you have favorites?
Like that analogy. That's very good.
So do you have a favorite out there that, before you jumped in and started making your own?
As of right now, absolutely. My favorite is probably Arch, but I don't have really anything negative to say about many of the other distributions that I've tried.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, I'll always have a soft spot for Ubuntu. As far as stability, you really can't beat Debian. There are a million distributions out there that do an awesome job, and those teams really do well. For me, just because of how I like to tinker and how I like to kind of build things anyway, Arch Linux is still my distribution of choice, so I'd probably stick with that. But Manjaro, that team does an amazing job. I know you've done several videos lately over Antergos or
Right.
however you say it.
Right.
But that team also does an amazing job. And some of what they've included with their releases, it really blows me away. They've done an amazing job providing the different desktop environments and things available to you. So I lean more towards the Arch-based distributions anyway, so I would probably stay more on that end of things. But at this point, the way I see it is really most of that is personal preference. I don't really think there's a bad way to go,
Yep.
just honestly.
Well, I agree with you, and get questions quite often. Hey, would you pick this distro? Why would you pick this distro over this distro? And that's a tough question, and some people are locked in. Others, I think, are more like you and I, where we see, hey, there's a tremendous amount really high quality work out there, and it's just a matter of personal preference at times. And there's some exceptions there depending on what the focus is. But
Right.
and that brings me to really another question. So, the Linux community as a whole, Linux as a whole, do you see things moving in the right direction there?
I really do. I really do. And as a matter of fact, I'm really excited. From the limited time now, granted, I haven't been really that involved in the community for years and years, but
Mm-hmm.
from the time that I have been, uh, I see the popularity of Linux growing, and that could be for a lot of different reasons. I can almost credit Microsoft Windows for part of that, but I shouldn't have said that. I don't mean to bash Windows at all. I think it's a fine system. It's just not for me. But I think Linux overall is heading in a good direction. One of the main negative things that I hear about Linux really has to do with um, the vast amount of distros out there, and it being overwhelming for a newer user, somebody first looking to switch over to Linux. And while I can understand that, at the same time, to me, that's one of the things that makes it so amazing. Is all the choices out there, and the community at whole, with all the different things that they can teach you and allow you to do, and all the many choices and different distributions and things that you can choose to make your system really your own.
Right.
But overall, I think there are some really good trends happening in Linux right now. There are things like the snappy packages coming along that could help with some of those issues with all the different distributions. Maybe kind of giving developers a way to develop packages that can be installed on multiple distributions without having to rebuild it, 2 or 3 different ways. So I think things are really headed in a good direction. I really do.
I'm on the same page with you, and I've been in and out of Linux. I tried to jump into Linux when Vista came on the scene, and Vista was and I'm like you. I do not hate Microsoft, or I do not hate Windows. But I got to say, with Windows Vista, that was a time I wanted to take my laptop out and bash it into a million pieces with a hammer. And
I can absolutely identify. Absolutely, yes.
so that was when I'm like, hey, this Linux thing is really looking good right now. So, but well, I have one more question for you, and then we'll wrap things up. I really appreciate your time. I imagine that I'm going to have many requests from viewers, from Linux Quest viewers, wanting to know where they could download and give OBR a try. Do you mind if we post a link in the video notes?
I would love for you to do that. Really, the biggest thing, and one of the reasons that I ended up contacting you about OBR is I love hearing the feedback. The more folks that want to give it a shot and try it out and see what they think about it, and maybe provide some feedback and comments or however, I would love that.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we'll get that in the video notes, and so Linux Quest viewers, fellow distro hoppers out there, go ahead and check out OBR. I think you'll really be impressed with it. I certainly was, and I know there's some things Jody's working on, and it's, as you've heard him state here, it's a work in progress. So I will say to you, if you see something that you think Jody should know about, certainly make that known. But at the same time, it's a work in progress. So be respectful to that, please. And I think that's the kind of thing that positive feedback is always good. And so, Jody, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And I think the Linux Quest viewers are going to love this. I love hearing the perspective from developers like yourself, and especially someone that's not been in Linux forever, someone who decided that, hey, this is something I want to gravitate towards and start working into and building out. And so I love this. So I hope that in the future, as you have made additional changes and additional development there, that you'll stay in touch with us on that, and maybe we can do this again.
Absolutely. I think that sounds like a great plan. Rob, I just wanted to tell you thank you for having me on, and I think you're doing great things with this channel, so keep it up.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it, and take care, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.